So in this video, the first thing which I have done is to move all the entity definitions from a single class file called class1.cs onto their own files. Now this is how it is supposed to be. We just had them in one single class file for the sake of making it easy to start typing in all the associations. Once we have done that, I've just moved them to all their own class files, and I also put them into a folder called entities. And now since that I do not want this class1.cs file, I can just go ahead and delete it. So every entity now is in its own file, and just make sure that you have the namespace as below. Now, once you create the data folder, and inside it you create the entities folder, and inside the entity folders, whenever you right click and say add a new class, okay, that's how you would create different entities under there. Now, as soon as you create a new class here, the namespace will be automatically assigned to temple.data.entities based on where it is physically residing. So let's just stick with that convention. Now if we focus on this aspect here, that a prasadam has or is associated with a prasadam type. This is another way of saying prasadam should mandatorily have a prasadam type. But what if we wanted it optional? Let's say, now as per the good design principles, every prasadam should be associated with one prasadam type. You should not be letting someone enter or capture a prasadam detail in their database without associating a type with it. But there are some situations, because of flexibility or wanting to keep a prasadam without a prasadam type, maybe they want to delete the prasadam type or something, or maybe they just want to enter all the prasadams once and then think about associating with some other type. Either ways, in case you would want to make this an optional one, so instead of saying a prasadam is associated with one prasadam type, it could be made 0 or 1 prasadam type. So how do we make it 0 or 1? We can do that by just putting a question mark here on the prasadam type ID. Now this is called a nullable int. So when this translates to a database being created, initially, if you had just left it as an int, this column would be not null on the database. But since now you have put this here, it becomes nullable. So basically this column can take in null values. So that's how you would want to do. For optional associations, you would want to make sure that you could actually store a null here. And roundabout by doing this, entity framework will also understand that there can a prasadam exist without having a prasadam type. If it really wants to have a prasadam type, then there is only one type it should associate to. Now this is what the constraint, foreign key constraint, also says in pure database terms, right? You can have one and only one type associated with a prasadam, or it can be null. So if you see the classical definition of foreign key reference, this is what it would be. So just by adding a question mark here, entity framework will figure out that this has to be an optional association. Now that we have made it null, there are some other consequences of using a nullable type, okay, which I'll probably cover in some other aspect. But for now that we have decided a prasadam has to be strongly associated with a type, let's just remove this nullable question mark. Also at this point, you might be asking yourself, what if I had not included this property? Remember, we talked about the fact that even if I do not include this reference key, entity framework will figure out that Prasadam has a associated type with it just by this statement at line number 16. So if I had left this out, we also know that EF would have gone ahead and created a column in the database, something like Prasadam underscore type underscore ID. It's just that it will not be visible here in the class, but it would have still gone ahead and created that by itself, because that's the only way at a logical database level relationships can be formed. But then the question comes as to what if I then wanted this to be optional? Because now I just said, you could include a question mark here and make it optional. But what if this property was not present? If this property was not present, the only way we could configure this to be optional was through Fluent API entity framework configurations. Now, what are they? We'll take a look at it in the upcoming video.